Star Trek: The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy. Secret of the Lizard People. Chapter 7. As the android looked on, Cadet Majors turned to Dr. Steinberg. "Sir," he asked, "are you absolutely certain you want to venture out there? We'll just be casting about, trying to figure out where the operations center is. In the meantime, we'll be fair game for every creature on the station." The doctor eyed Majors for a moment, no doubt considering his point of view in light of his stellar reputation at the Academy. "Believe me," she said at last, "I've thought about that. But if we're to rescue these people, we've got to take some chances." Then, without any further discussion, Steinberg headed for the door. Data saw Major's frown deepen before, grudgingly, it seemed, he fell into line behind the medical officer. The android wondered if Cadet Majors might not be right. After all, he'd had more training in tactical matters. The doctor had been thrust into the role of leader, even though it was clearly not her field of expertise. As Data weighed this possibility in his mind, he saw something out of the corner of his eye, a streak of yellow-green darting from one clump of foliage to another. One of the lizard creatures, he thought. Drawing his phaser, the android waited for it to show itself again. "Data," said Steinberg, stopping to look at him. There was a note of alarm in her voice. "What is it? Did you see another of them?" "Yes," the android replied, careful not to take his eyes off the spot where he believed the creature had hidden itself. "Or perhaps it is the first one we found, recovered now from Cinna's phaser beam." "Leave it here," the doctor told him. "We're going to be gone in a minute anyway." "With all due respect, sir," Cinna responded, "it could follow us out into the corridor. Better to deal with it now and not have to worry about it later." "Besides," added Petros, "it could hurt the aliens." Another officer might have taken offense at the cadet's audacity. However, bad allergies today. However, Dr. Steinberg seemed to be the kind of person who valued the opinions of others, no matter who they were. "All right, then," said the medical officer. "We'll do as Cadet Cinna advises. But once we've stunned it, we're out of here." She licked her lips, her eyes flitting from one section of the botanical garden to another. "Whatever you do, stay together. I want everybody's back covered." A pause. "Lead on, Data." The android did as he was told. Advancing between two clumps of alien flora, he looked right and then left. Still no sign of the creature, no flash of scales to give it away. Suddenly Majors cried out, "I've got it!" At the same time, a crimson beam sliced through the air, tearing apart a spidery shrub with black leaves and yellow flowers. As the ruined leaves fluttered to the ground, the cadets all converged on the spot. But there was no lizard being there. Everyone looked at Majors, who looked back at them with something like anger in his voice. "I thought I had it," he barked. His face darkened until it was the same color as his phaser beam. "I don't understand how I could have..." Data was too distracted to fully grasp what happened next. However, the result of it was painfully obvious, especially to Dr. Steinberg, who found herself grappling desperately to keep a hissing lizard creature from ripping out her throat. Majors aimed his phaser at the lizard being, but before he could fire, Petros pushed the weapon aside. "You'll hit the doctor!" she cried. Noting the wisdom in Petros's warning, the android realized there was only one other option open to him. Once again, undaunted by the possibility of having his neural net destroyed, Data flung himself at the creature and tore it free of its hold on Dr. Steinberg. Then, reluctant to set it loose, the android slammed the lizard being to the ground. He didn't dare use his full strength for fear of killing it, but the impact was sufficient to daze it for a moment. That was all the time the other cadets needed. Two phaser beams hit the creature, one right after the other, and the lizard being went limp in Data's grasp. Turning his attention to Dr. Steinberg, the android saw that she had been badly hurt. Though her containment suit was uncompromised, the skin around her right temple was already purple with large, painful-looking bruises. There was a good chance she had suffered internal injuries as well. "Data?" she groaned through clenched teeth. "My hypospray." Locating the device on the outside of the doctor's suit, the android detached it and handed it to her. With trembling fingers, Steinberg input the necessary information and pressed the spray against her upper arm, where it injected her right through the fabric of the containment suit with the compound she had prescribed. A second later, Data saw the medical officer relax. The muscles in her face seemed to lose their tension as well. "A painkiller," Steinberg breathed, providing an explanation. "Making me groggy, so groggy, but necessary." Raising her hand, she gestured for the android to lower his face closer to hers. "Can't see well," she told him, "or think well. But..." Her nostrils flared with the effort to stay focused. "I'll need medical help soon, if I'm to survive." By then, the other cadets had clustered around them. Cinna and Petros winced at the sight of their fallen leader. Only Cadet Majors kept watch over the garden, so none of the other creatures could take them by surprise. "What would you have us do?" the android asked the doctor. Steinberg swallowed. "Take me someplace safe from the someplace safe from the creatures, Data. Then head for..." Before she could finish, her eyes closed and her head lolled to the side. Concerned, the android used his tricorder to measure her biosigns. The doctor was unconscious but stable. Unfortunately, there was no guarantee that she would remain that way. "What was she trying to tell us?" asked Petros. "What did she want us to do after we took her to a safe place?" "The same thing she asked us to do before," Cinna replied. "Find the operations center and see if we can maneuver the station out of the asteroid belt." Liana looked to Glenn Majors as if expecting him to oppose her, as he did earlier. However, the second-year cadet wasn't even looking at her. He was staring at Dr. Steinberg, paler than ever. Data approached Majors, though the human didn't seem to notice. "Are you all right?" he asked. Finally, Majors turned to him, but he didn't answer. He just clenched his jaw, turned back to the medical officer, and went on staring. It took them a while, but the cadets finally found what Dr. Steinberg had asked them for, someplace safe. A cabin that was free of the lizard creatures and likely to stay that way. The search might have gone faster, but as they progressed through several different corridors and maintenance tubes, they were forced time and again to elude the lizard beings prowling throughout the station. Several times, Data's tricorder had warned him that they were close to being cornered by the creatures. But in each instance, the cadets had managed to slip away without actually encountering them. Sitting with their backs propped against the cabin's walls, and the motionless figure of the medical officer stretched out between them, the android and his companions took a moment to think things through. "One of us has to stay here with Dr. Steinberg," Cinna said after a while the rest of us try to locate the operations center." Abruptly, Cadet Majors, who had been silent and unresponsive until that point, shook his head. "No," he stated flatly. "We're not going to the operations center. We're staying right where we are until help arrives." Majors looked even paler than before, Data observed, and he was sweating much more profusely than either Cinna or Petros. Petros looked at the second-year cadet, a little surprised. "But Dr. Steinberg told us she wanted us to." "Dr. Steinberg isn't in charge of this mission anymore." "Sorry," Majors pointed out. "I am. I have seniority here, and I say we stay where we are." It was true that majors outranked them, the android reflected. However, he had learned at the academy that a standing order from a commanding officer was to be carried out no matter what, even in that officer's absence. He said so. "Wait a minute," said Cinna, smiling at Data. "That's right, isn't it? We have to follow Dr. Steinberg's instructions, no matter who outranks whom." Major swallowed hard. "Listen to me," he told them. His voice was reedier than normal. "It's too dangerous to try to reach the operations center. For one thing, we still don't know where it is. And even if we find the place, our friend the android may not be able to accomplish as much as he thinks." He licked his lips. "Our best bet is to stay put until the captain sends another team after us." Data was as reluctant as ever to question Glenn Major's judgment. Of all of them, Majors had the most experience in such scenarios, at least in terms of academy simulations, and besides, every account of him that the android had ever read described Majors as outstanding leadership material. And yet, the android straightened. "I do not think staying put, as you describe it, is the best course of action," he remarked. "If we wait too long, Dr. Steinberg could die here. Also," Data hesitated. After all, this was Glenn Majors he was talking to. Glenn Majors, who had not so long ago been the standard of confidence to which he aspired. But somehow he couldn't be certain anymore that the standard was still valid. "I may be more capable than you give me credit for," he finished. Majors seemed taken aback at first. Then he glared at the android, his eyes narrowing, a cruel smirk taking shape on his lips. "How about that?" he said slowly. "The mechanical man thinks he knows more than I do." The muscles worked in his temple for a moment. "All right, Data. You want to show us how smart you are? Go ahead." The human got up and crossed the small room, then looked down at Data from his full height. He pointed a forefinger at the android, a forefinger that was trembling with barely contained emotion. "But I'm still the one in charge," rasped Majors. "I'm still the leader here. And when your little plan turns sour, I'll be the one who'll have to figure out a way to get us out of here." For the first time, Data recognized that Cinna might have been right about Glenn Majors. The android didn't know much about leadership, but even he understood that a good commander was not supposed to let his emotions get the best of him. Perhaps, he told himself, Cadet Majors is not such a good role model after all. Chapter 8. It turned out to be a simple matter to track down the alien station's operations center. Data just had to follow the bundles of circuitry and the tubes they'd been traveling through all along. Where the bundles became thicker, it stood to reason that they were getting closer to their destination. Where the bundles became thinner, they were getting farther away. "And you knew this all along?" asked Cinna, as they crawled through a tube, just ahead of Cadet Majors. Despite Major's earlier statements, he was showing no particular desire to lead them. "I did not know it," the android corrected her. "I simply suspected. Even now, there is no proof that I am correct in my assumption, though I believe we will know that soon enough." "You mean we're almost there?" asked Theana. She seemed understandably relieved by the prospect. "Based on my estimate of the station's size," Data replied, "I would say we are not more than 300 meters from the operations center. If we do not reach it in the next several minutes, we will know that my hypothesis is without a basis in fact." "And then we'll have to start all over again," Cinna noted. The android nodded. "Yes, an inconvenience, though a significant one. However, for Dr. Steinberg, such a state of affairs might prove disastrous." Petros had volunteered to stay and watch over the medical officer. However, the cadet knew almost nothing about how to care for Steinberg. As the doctor herself had pointed out, she needed the sort of facilities only the Republic's sickbay could offer. Abruptly, Data stopped and looked back over his shoulder in Major's direction. The second-year cadet, who was crawling with his head down, didn't notice the android's action, but Cinna did. "What is it?" she asked the android. Data listened with all the concentration he could muster. A moment later, his effort was rewarded, if one could call the distant sound of growling a reward. "The creatures," he told his friend. "I hear them coming." He pointed past Majors, back in the direction they had come from. "From that direction," he elaborated. "The creatures?" echoed Majors, suddenly roused from his reverie. He stared hollow-eyed at the android. We can't let them get to us in here. We won't have a prayer in such close quarters." Data returned his gaze. "I do not think we have a choice," he responded. "There are no exits in sight. I suggest that you and Cadet Cinna get behind me and keep moving. I will do my best to protect all of us." "No," Liana told him, her expression solemn and determined. "I'm not going to let you sacrifice yourself for us." The android took out his phaser and made sure it was set on heavy stun. "I have no intention of sacrificing myself," he told Cinna. "There is simply no room in this tube for more than one of us to establish a defense. And as the one able to fire the fastest and with the greatest accuracy, it seems reasonable that I should act as rear guard." It was not easy for the Yana to argue with that. Clamping her lips shut, she crawled past Data. Majors was right on her heels, obviously not eager to remain in the creature's way. By the time his fellow cadets were up ahead of him, the growling had grown louder, and within seconds Data caught a glimpse of the foremost creature as it came hurtling toward them along the length of the tube. Carefully, the android took aim and fired his phaser. Its fiery red beam hit the lizard being square in the chest. As it slumped to the bottom of the tube, two more appeared in its wake. Data was able to take one of these down, but not the other, at least not right away. And as he made the attempt, two new creatures bounded past the unconscious forms of their pack mates. What followed was difficult even for the android to follow. Even as he disabled several of the lizard beings with his stun beams, a few others appeared to skitter past him by virtue of their great speed. By then, it seemed Cinna and Majors had entered the fray as well, discharging their phasers with whatever accuracy they could manage in the narrow confines of the tube. It was bedlam. Chaos. Data found himself wrestling with one of the creatures. No sooner had he slammed it against the lining of the tube, knocking it senseless, than another leaped at him. But fortunately for the android and his companions, the conflict didn't last very long. When the tube was quiet again, and Data counted 9 unconscious lizard beings in all, none of the cadets had been hurt very badly, though their containment suits had been torn here and there. The android's suit, in particular, had suffered several long gashes. However, it had not been in good repair even before this battle. His previous confrontations with the creatures had taken their toll on it. "Just great," said Majors, inspecting a small rip in his garb. "How long am I going to be able to tolerate that radiation now?" "I would not worry about that if I were you," Data told him. "By the time the radiation becomes a problem for you, the Super Jovian worlds will have become a sun. At that time, we will either be safe but back on the Republic, or destroyed in the process of ignition." Majors cast a withering look at the android through his faceplate. "Thanks," he muttered. "I feel a whole lot better now." "Come on," said Cinna. "Let's get out of here before a few more of them get wind of us." This time, Major scurried ahead of them, and though he continued to look back over his shoulder every so often, he set an admirable pace. But after they followed the tube for 50 meters or so, they encountered the last thing Data had expected: a dead end. At least for the 3 cadets. The bundles of circuitry continued through a tiny hole in the barrier ahead of them, presumably into the operations center proper. However, the android and his companions couldn't have hoped to fit through that hole in their wildest dreams. "I can't believe this," snarled Majors. Frustrated, he pounded his fist on the barrier. "We've come all this way, and for what?" Turning to Data, he spat. "You said you would get us to the operations center." "I said I would try," the android replied. and I have not yet given up on the attempt, nor did I expect that this tube would lead us all the way into the facility we seek. We passed an access panel just a couple of minutes ago, Cinna offered hopefully. If we're in the neighborhood of the operations center, we ought to be able to reach it via one of the corridors. Major's eyes opened wide. The corridors? But there's no telling how many of them could be out there. If they're in the tubes, Liana observed, we're not safe anywhere. Don't you see that? We would have been safe if we'd stayed in the cabin with Steinberg and Petros, Majors argued. We never should have left that place. It is too late for this discussion to gain us anything, Data reminded them. And without another word, he headed back toward the access panel they'd left behind. Cinna had the sense to follow him, and without anyone to contend with, Cadet Majors had no other option but to trail along. It only took a few moments for Data and his comrades to find the access panel, exit the tube, and make their way through the corridor to a set of doors. Like the doors to the botanical garden, they opened with a soft hiss at the cadets' approach. But as those same doors closed behind them, the android observed that they were not in the place they had been looking for. Judging by the look on Major's face, he had come to the same conclusion. This isn't an operations center, he said, walking across the room toward its only console and scanning the monitor on the bulkhead above it. It can't be. It's too small, too sparsely equipped. He cast a withering glance at Data. You blew it, Tin Man. Again. The android conceded inwardly that he had miscalculated. They seemed to be in a specialized facility of some sort, one with its own small airlock, no less. He guessed that it was an environmental control nexus or something similar, but definitely not an operations center. However, there was no point in dwelling on that now. He could ponder his failings later, if there was a later. At this moment, Data told himself, the preferred course was to assess their situation and see what steps were required to reach the goal they had set for themselves. Advancing to the console where Major stood, the android took a closer look at the monitor. It displayed a cross-section of the station, rendered in thin blue lines. There were red and green dots at intervals, perhaps signifying life support stations. Using his forefinger, Data started with their point of entry and traced the path they had taken through the alien facility. What are you doing? Asked Cinna. Attempting to determine our present location, he explained. A moment later, he found it. We seem to be here, he noted, indicating the spot for his companion's edification. If I am correct, we are near the middle of the station. And the operations center? Asked Liana. The android moved his finger to the representation of a somewhat larger cabin than the one they occupied. That would appear to be here, he told her. Approximately 100 meters away. Sure, spat Majors, muscles working in his jaw. Lead us on another wild goose chase. And how are we supposed to get there this time? Frowning at Majors, Cinna went over to the airlock hatch and hunkered down beside it. Too bad we can't get around outside the station. Too bad indeed, Data agreed silently. Unfortunately, their containment suits weren't proof against the rigors of space, and since they had been ripped in the latest lizard attack, they were even less so. The android's head tilted as something occurred to him. Knowing what that meant, Cinna approached him. You've thought of something, she said. I have, he admitted. Specifically, that one of us can have some mobility outside the station. That one being you, Cinna noted. Precisely, Data replied. After all, the station is not moving through space, and since I do not require air to breathe, or a strictly controlled environmental temperature, I can survive for a limited period in the vacuum, certainly long enough to make it to the next airlock. Which conveniently opens on the operations center? Asked Liana. I do not believe so, the android answered, glancing again at the diagram of the ship on the alien monitor. He pointed to what he believed was the location of the next airlock. However, it appears to open on a facility just down a short corridor from it. Cinna looked at him. And if it doesn't? Then I am risking no other life but my own, Data assured her, though it was, the android gathered, not the answer she was hoping for. Wait a minute, snarled Majors, drawing his companion's attention. You're not really going to do this, he told Data. Why not? Asked the android. If the cadet had a valid reason that prevented him from proceeding with his plan, he wanted to hear it before he went any further. Because I made this trip to humor you, Majors continued. I never had any intention of letting you try to pilot the station out of the asteroid belt. His eyes narrowed in what Data now recognized as contempt. You're not a pilot, the cadet rasped. You haven't got the instincts or the experience. All you'll do is get us killed. Data looked at him. Nonetheless, he said resolutely, it is the only way to save the station and its occupants, ourselves included. Believing that their conversation was over, the android moved to the airlock until a bright red beam of light speared the bulkhead just ahead of him, leaving a smoking black char mark on the metallic surface. Data! Cried Cinna. Data turned and saw the phaser in Major's trembling hand. It was pointed right at the android, and at this close range, it was highly unlikely that it would miss.